Welcome to the Coffee with Creators podcast, a casual conversation with creators about life and experiences. I'm your friend and your host, Michael. Jade is a brand designer who runs the Brainchild studios in Australia. I discovered her Instagram account at the very beginning of my social media journey a few years ago, and I still continue to follow her to this day. This was a genuinely fun conversation as I've never really had the chance to speak with a fellow graphic designer on the podcast before. We talk about the importance of communication as well as the highs and lows of being in this field. If you're watching this episode, you might wonder why sometimes the sound gets cut off either for me or for her, and it's due to the fact that I had to be a bit creative with the editing thanks to a crazy long delay of the video feed. Oh, and my camera even goes out for a bit. Regardless, it was a great episode to make, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. Here's Jade. Well, that was a nice warm-up. I mean, a lot of fumbling with technology.
Yeah, we're warm.
Yeah, we're very warm. It's this is the third time that I had to go on, get on the camera and be like, "Hi, Jade, welcome to the podcast." But such is the nature of this podcast, this scrappy little podcast. But Jade, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You live across the globe
Yes.
from where I live.
Yes.
Where exactly are you?
Called Australia.
I heard it's really
You've
nice
heard of
there.
it?
Unfortunately, there's a lot of spiders there too.
Spiders. We're currently flooding, so there's
Oh.
that.
Oh, I didn't think it flooded there for some reason. I don't know why. When I think of Australia, I think of like sunny beaches, perfect weather.
We've got those too.
Spiders.
No, not perfect weather right now. Spiders, snakes.
I
Lots
hate
of things will try
spiders.
to kill you.
I
Me too.
know that's the common theme that I keep hearing. Like Australia is beautiful if nothing was trying to kill you, but unfortunately, there's a lot of things. I'm just saying that because I'm afraid of everything. I'm afraid of spiders. I'm afraid of just about everything. But it's
Yeah.
one of the places that my wife and I have always wanted to go visit. We see all the videos, the pictures, and we actually know someone who has gone there for I think a good like few months. Absolutely loves it. He said that if he had the choice, he would actually just live there. I'm like, oh, well,
Yeah.
thank you for making me jealous.
Well,
Yeah.
come over anytime, you and the fam. I've got children too, so they can all keep each other amused. Yeah,
Oh
so we
yeah.
are
Yeah,
an hour from Sydney.
okay. Okay. And Sydney is like the main, is it like the main, how do you say it? Like
It's not
city?
the capital, but anyone from Sydney would say
It's
that
not the
it is,
capital.
but it's not.
Ah, I see.
It's
I
just
see
the
what you're
place
saying.
that everyone
Okay.
knows. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, Jade, I'm super excited to have you on today in this podcast because you probably don't know this, but I actually have been following you ever since way before I started my whole social media thing. Like, I was a graphic designer and I was very
Yeah.
new to the freelance world. And your account was one of those accounts that I found just because I was looking for inspirations. I was like, okay, I need to find other designers online. And I was just like searching through Instagram. I think I had like 3 followers at this time. And it was my mom, I think, and my sister was following me or something like that. And then I came across the Brainchild Studios, and I can't remember
Yeah.
exactly what it was, what particular design, but I do remember seeing there was a door and there was a horse. It was like a
Mm-hmm.
is am I near am I close to my is
Yeah.
my description like
I was just
accurate?
waiting.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to wait for you to finish explaining it.
Well, that's the thing. I can't really
Yes.
explain it. And
So it was a branding client of mine, and part of the branding package, I offer extra designs, and she wanted signage for the shop. And so she had this beautiful boutique, and her business name was Pony. And I was like, can I design a door where it looks like the horse is jumping out of the door? And she was like, yeah, whatever. Like, she was just the coolest client. I'm like, yes. I didn't tell her like it would have every opportunity to look terrible. Um, but I took, if anyone knows, it is an album cover, and now I've just gone blank. something thieves. Is an album cover that I took inspiration from, where it looks like the horse is coming out of the mist. And I worked with the sign writers, and they did a lot of the technical stuff on how to make it actually look with the design, because you had to have the head that was opaque, and then areas of the door that was translucent. So it was a lot more than my design. It was a real team effort, but it has such a great effect at nighttime, and yeah, it got a lot of love on the gram, which is where you found me.
Overall, it was really good. It's surprising to hear you say that it had every opportunity to go wrong because it
I'll
looked
tell you,
perfect
yes.
to me, and I'm like, this person knew what she was doing, and it's pretty funny to hear you say
Oh,
that oh my, I hope it looks good.
I remember when it was installed, and I was driving past, and I was so scared that it was going to look bad. I was just like bracing myself driving past the shop, and then just this, I nearly had a car accident thinking, oh, it's good, it's good.
No, it's, yeah, it's a very good. And for those who are listening, and when I brought up the horse on the door, people are like, what is he talking about? So imagine a frosted glass door. So it's like transparent, translucent, right? I think it's like the best way to describe it.
Mhm.
So you can kind of see shadows
Mhm.
behind it. If someone's standing behind the door, you can see the silhouette, or the shape of the person. And the design was
Mhm.
of a horse. Like, the opaque part of the design was that, I guess, the front half of the horse that looks like it's jumping out from the glass. It, like, in concept, it already sounds awesome, but in actual, like, the actual execution of it was really great. And that was one of the earlier designs that I saw. And going back to when I was browsing through Instagram, I just looked at your design, and especially this is coming from someone who is very young in the freelance world. I'm sorry, my phone is ringing. I silenced this,
You're
but
such a
all right, there
professional.
you
Let me
go.
just say that.
I appreciate you saying that. It made me feel so much better because I feel like everything is going wrong today.
Oh,
But but
we're just rolling with the punches.
uh,
Like, my house is flooding, so it's like,
okay, we need to get to that flooding. Okay, I need to ask you what's going on. But to just wrap up what I was trying to say
yeah.
is that, as someone who was very new in the freelance world, I needed some sort of like inspiration and some of a community that I could kind of look up to, and be like, hey, I want to be like this person, right? Like, and your designs was they were very inspiring. They were very simple and clean and just professional. And I'm like, maybe one day I can be like that. I remember saying that. Maybe one day I can be like that. And so
Oh,
I've been following your
stop.
account for that long. Yeah, and and
Wow.
I've kept, I kept following you because I don't know, it's just part of that journey where I remember the people that inspired me, the accounts that inspired me. And this is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't want to sound like a stalker,
Mhm.
but I know every so often you would post you would post like a photo of yourself, basically reintroducing yourself to your audience and your
Uh-huh.
clients. And I thought that was amazing. I
Yep.
thought that was um, very smart, and I thought that was very personable. I think that's the best way I could describe it, because suddenly this account isn't just about showing off my design. Suddenly this account is about a person.
Mm.
And there was one particular post that you made that I will not forget, and that was about talking about focusing on, like, a small um, number of clientele. And I don't remember exactly the words that you used, but the messaging there was basically,
The choice to
it's
stay
not it's
small.
not a I think that was it. Like, you wanted to stay small in the sense that you wanted to focus on
Mm.
these people. It's not about trying to grow into like this huge number, which when I read it, I'm like, I feel like she could have a lot more followers. Like, like she deserves a lot more. But then after reading it, I'm like, I wonder why. But then the message that I got at the end was that you really just wanted to focus on these people. Like, they are people to you. They're not just clients. They're actual people.
Mm.
And I thought that I appreciated that. So I wish I could name that that post or how long ago that was, but basically what I'm just trying to say is that I've been following you for a while. And so you are one of the earlier,
So
especially the
flattering.
earlier
Thank you.
inspirations for me. Yeah. And I'm not
Wow.
just some guy who
Wow.
just came out of the blue and be like, hey, Jade, want to be on the podcast? No, I've been a fan. Let's just put it that way. So anyway, the flooding.
Oh, yes. It's okay. I'll let you know if,
Okay.
or you'll see me float away. Because yeah, it
Hopefully not.
um, Queensland and the upper state of my state, northern New South Wales, it's crazy. A lot of houses are underwater, and yeah, 2 years ago we had the bushfires, and now we have the floods, and in between we just had a little pandemic. I'm not sure if you've heard of COVID,
Oh yeah, I've
but yeah,
kind of
it's just
heard
one thing
about that.
after
Yeah.
another.
How
Yeah,
terrible.
it was up there too, was it?
Yeah. It kind of happened here too. Like we were stuck at home for actually interesting. That's actually what I want to ask you about this one. So this whole thing for me, this whole social media thing for me started, and even this podcast right now started because of the pandemic. And so it really started because of like I had nothing to do. And I've gotten to a point in my life where I said, well, I this is these are the cards that life dealt me, and what do I do with them? And so basically I just
Yeah.
it's kind of like I was at that point where I said, hey, I mean, what else could go wrong? Right? So I just tried my best to find something. Yeah, that's the best way I can describe it. Just tried my best. So how did you deal with that really challenging year, 2020, I think? How was business for
Yeah,
you?
it started in 2020, didn't it? So I was busier than ever. I remember my friends and family saying, "Are you worried? Are you worried that you're not going to get any work and that business is going to dry up?" And it just wasn't a thought in my mind that I wasn't going to be working through it. It was more that I needed to homeschool my children, and that I'd have to homeschool and also run a business. And I'm like, oh, how am I going to do this? But what I thought was going to happen happened is business owners were at home and they finally had some time to work on their own business, and a lot of them weren't online ready. And so I did so many websites over the course of 2020 and 2021. I'm so done with designing websites. But yeah, that side of the business definitely took charge.
That's good. That's good. So were you kind of expecting this to happen?
No, I didn't know COVID was going to happen.
No, no. I mean, I should have rephrased that. When COVID happened, did you kind of expect
Yeah.
that people were that business was going to boom? I guess is what I was trying to say. Yeah.
I
You
I
got me there. I'm like,
I didn't even think it would dry up and I would have no clients. I really did think that people are going to want websites. And so maybe I changed my strategy on my social media, and maybe had a few of those targeted posts where I was talking about being online to get you through. And yeah, I really said a lot of no's during that time, like, no, not yet. I can do that and a few months down the track. Like we touched on before, I only take on so many clients at once, for a few reasons, because I just don't have the mental capacity to have a lot of clients on at once. And two, I wouldn't deliver my best work if I'm swamped. And I want every client of mine to leave and just feel like they've had a real experience and just get the best work out of me. And the best work isn't me at my worst. So, um, and also I had to homeschool, so I had to have that ability to be able to
yeah.
homeschool and work during the same day and still try to sleep. So yeah, there was a few reasons why I couldn't take on everyone that inquired, unfortunately. And I hate saying no, so it was hard.
I think the struggle there is, yeah, I bet it was very difficult. I mean, it's so interesting to hear you say that, and I feel like you have more of the foresight of like how to take care of yourself. And I don't know how you came up, that came to be, maybe through experience, or maybe you're just
Mm,
wiser than me. Because for me, it was like
no.
I had to go through those pains, like those mental
Mm,
breakdowns, and before I realized that, hey, there's only one me, and I can either, give myself a break and give my clients the best work possible, or just keep saying yes to
yeah.
everything. And that was basically what I said, what I did. I just kept saying yes to everything, to to my
To
detriment.
your
I mean,
detriment.
it was just it,
Yeah,
yeah, it was
exactly.
very terrible. So to hear you say that, I mean, that's I wish I was like that. I guess that's what I'm saying. I wish I knew that from the very beginning, because it's good. And I think this all again
Yeah,
speaks to your whole approach to things. Like, you want to really give that personal touch, right? Like that, like you want your clients to feel that they have your full attention. And that's very crucial in
exactly.
today's world, I think. Right? Especially because no
Yeah.
matter how good or talented you are, if you're not giving if you're not making your clients feel important, then they're not coming back.
Mm,
And it's like you're
exactly.
definitely not also being
They're not
recommended. Yeah.
recommending you.
So
Yeah.
exactly. So how do you approach your clients? Like, do you get your clients through word of mouth? I'm really curious, because I know you focus on a very specific
Sure.
demographic. And this sounds like it's good. So how does that go about? Like, do you do any sort of marketing, or is it mostly just recommendations or referrals?
So at the start, it was very much recommendations. My first year, it was I really relied on the community. So, and I think that's just started that work with Jade. She's amazing. That's the experience that I want my clients to have at the end. No matter where I end up, I always want that when you first work with a business and they're just started and they've got that enthusiasm and they're keen and you've got their full attention, like you said. And that's what I want my clients to feel like. I never want them to feel like um, they've been sold. That would be the worst thing to hear from feedback from a client, that they felt like I didn't live up to the promise, or I didn't live up to the standard that they were expecting. And if I did get that feedback, I would really have to have a look at what went wrong there, because um, yeah, I am really particular with not just how many, but who I take on now. And you say that I'm wise, but it is just from experience, because I was a yes girl and took on everything and anything, and you do when you're broke and you need the money to pay the bills and buy food. So it's only from experience that I have said, wow, I really didn't enjoy that experience with that person. And how
Mm-hmm.
did I let them treat me that way? And so, from just reflecting on the journey with that client that wasn't ideal, I've pinpointed things where I'm like, okay, well, that wouldn't have actually been that bad if I had given them a script at the start, or if I had a longer onboarding process. I could have like potentially weeded them out. Um, and so, just from this is my sixth year with this business. I've been designing for 10 plus years. Um, but with this business, it's just from those experiences, and for me to think, oh, I actually can't do it all. If I take on everything, it affects every aspect of my life when I'm run down. And like you said, you have to experience burnout for you to change things. And I did experience
Yeah.
burnout. I
Yeah.
did experience panic attacks. And it really, I think it was the end of 2019, start of 2020. It was probably my worst year. And I really just had to not only create boundaries, but really stick to them, because I think there's two different things.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely relate to that one. So I feel like it's funny, because I can go on with this particular topic, and I just have to
Same.
say that this is really interesting to me, because I've never really spoken to a designer before, like a graphic design. Would you call yourself a web designer or a graphic designer? How would you, or a brand designer? How would you define your, or what
Ooh.
would you call yourself?
I'm all those things. I really not, I wouldn't be offended if you called me any of those things. I do introduce
Okay.
myself as a brand and website designer because I don't typically get like, I need a business card. Can you design it for me? I don't typically get those clients anymore. It's more the bigger project things that I'm sort of focusing on. So I do try to put myself at the brand and website design area, but graphic design is what it all boils down to. And then just with
Okay.
experience,
Yeah.
you can then put a brand strategist title on there and web designer.
Yeah. That is actually that's why I wanted to ask you because I've never really talked to a designer like in your specific trade before. Usually the people that I have conversations with, oddly enough, I've been a designer for the last 15 years of my career, and not a very good one, but that was what was paying the bills. But most of the people that I have conversations with are video editors or filmmakers or photographers, and very rarely do I come across designers like what you and I basically do on a daily
Yeah.
basis. And that's why I
Hmm.
said this is really interesting to me, but I'm trying to steer away from uh, the type of conversation that kind of sounds like inside baseball. You know what I mean? Like something that other people will be like, what the heck
Yeah.
are they talking about?
You got to be
So,
relatable. Yes.
yeah, I'm trying to make this, I'm trying not to make this about my own curiosity as much as possible. However, I do want to talk about like your career as a designer. So, how do you feel about um, designers nowadays? And I hear a lot of grumblings about programs or apps that you can download that anyone
Yeah.
can download. Like for example, Canva. I'm sure you've heard of Canva, and
Canva.
how yeah, it seems to be
How
like
much time do we
every
have?
designer's nightmare.
Oh, it's
So
not a competition.
okay. So here's the thing. This is what I've been trying to tell people when they ask me about that. I said, you can give the people the tools, but they won't be able to really translate using those tools into the messaging that their clients
Exactly.
want. And so I don't know. I just want to hear about what you think about that, this whole thing, because it seems to be like a conversation that always pops up with me. Like, how do you feel about why do I have to pay you
Yeah,
if I can just
right.
use Canva? I'll be like, go ahead, use Canva. I
Well,
mean, I'm not
I would
stopping
I
you.
would answer that like I would say go use Canva and I'll see you in an hour.
I'll save your spot here so we can have this conversation.
Yep.
Go use Canva and we'll talk
I'll just
again. Yeah.
bookmark this.
Twiddling my thumbs like he should be back in about like 5 minutes from now. So so
Ring
that seems to
ring.
be that seems to be one of the reoccurring themes in the world of design. Like I always hear designers complaining about tools that are being readily available for everyone to use. Like even I
Mhm.
remember when Photoshop came out, photographers were grumbling. Like that's not real photography if you can manipulate the photos, right? And that's kind of like how I feel about all these tools. Like you can have all these awesome
Mm,
tools, but it doesn't really. I guess I guess some designers feel that they're being robbed of their skills or their value when new tools are being introduced. I mean, awesome tools, right?
mm,
But I just couldn't put or find the words to try to describe to people that it's not about the tools. It's about
yeah,
like, first of all, I think it's really about the relationship between you and the client. It's very important to me. And I think,
it's all communication.
transactions like that, yeah, the communication is one of the most underutilized tools in humanity. I believe that if
Hmm.
everyone can communicate, like it doesn't have to be um, just well enough for us to understand each other, there would be less
Yeah.
conflict. There would be much more of like the good stuff, I feel like. And as
Hmm.
designers, I think what really sets us apart from Canva, for example, is our ability to communicate. I don't even know where this is going, where I'm taking this conversation, but I just wanted to see your
So,
views on this whole thing. Yeah.
sure. Well, I don't, like I said, I don't see it as competition. I think it's a fantastic tool for those fast jobs that small business owners and some of my clients say they use Canva, especially when they are internally marketing. So they're not externally marketing to their audience. It's in-house. Um, it's a fantastic tool for that. It's a fantastic tool if you just need something really quick. Where it lacks, where do I start? It lacks so much. And okay, for example, I actually did an educational post because I too, like you, were getting, why would I pay you upwards of $3,000 for a design when I could just do it myself on Canva using a template? And I would have to say, okay, yes, if you use a template, that design is not yours. One, you can't, you don't, if you're designing a logo in Canva, you cannot download a file where you can enlarge it without losing quality.
Mm-hmm.
You are limited to fonts, and also in the most respectful way, the client is not a designer and can't articulate a design that will get them what they want, and that is the biggest point. Um, so for anything that is going to push your business to succeed, I think investing in a professional to get professional standard designs is the wisest foot forward. But there's
You
a
just
time and
hit it
place
in
for
the
Canva.
head.
I'm not poo-pooing
Yeah.
it. Oh, thanks.
Yeah. No, yeah. If I had a bell right here, I would be like, ding, ding, ding. This is it. That's exactly what it is. Like in the most
Much.
respectable way. It's the most
Yeah.
respect in the most respectable yeah, way of saying it. Like you are not a designer, and that is why you go to a professional.
Yep.
It's not even about like the education necessarily. It's the experience of this person when it comes to design. After the break, we talk about imposter syndrome, what it's like to be a self taught designer, and also how common it actually is to be ghosted by your clients. Stick around. This has been one of the biggest pain points in my journey, so I'm going to share with you one of the best decisions and investments I've made as a content creator, and that is signing up with an online library of copyright free music. Whether you're new to creating content or a full fledged creator, you know exactly the pain, frustration, and how much time it takes to find the right music. Not to mention, it gets really expensive paying for individual tracks. Epidemic Sound is the answer to all of that. They have thousands of high quality, royalty free music and sound effects that you can choose from for one affordable monthly rate. Their service has saved me so much time and money over the years, and I cannot recommend them enough. So, for the Coffee with Creators listeners out there, you can try them out for 30 days risk free by going to your web browser and typing in share.epidemicsound.com/CWC. Once you sign up, you have full access to their vast library, and I promise you, your brain, your wallet, and even your audience will thank you for it. Again, head over to share.epidemicsound.com/CWC for a 30-day trial. Myself, I went to school for advertising, and I am not a graphic
Nice.
designer at all. I'm not even a designer per se. It was just when I went to school for advertising, it was a lot about it's a lot about more about thinking of ideas and thinking creatively, thinking out of the
Mm-hmm.
box, and just coming up with all these concepts. And not all of the people in my class knew how to draw or design, and they just had that vision basically. And so when I
Mm-hmm.
moved to
Mm-hmm.
to the states, I had no experience, and the only job that I could find that was willing to pay me enough so I could pay for rent was basically a graphic designer.
Yep.
And I kind of knew Photoshop, and I kind of knew how to do this, but then that turned into a
You knew enough.
15-year career. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I just knew enough that I was able to get by. And I think, crucially, one of the things that I was very much open with is just learning and being coached by people,
Yeah.
right? Like if I didn't know how something worked, I would just ask them. I said, how does this work? How do you use InDesign, for example? How do you use Illustrator? And so that became my education as a designer. And so when some of these people approach me, their first question was, what school, or where should I go to in terms of like schooling, design school, whatever? Do you recommend this? And I find myself in this position where it was kind of hard for me to recommend going to school because that wasn't my experience.
Yeah. Neither was mine.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So I want to hear
Yeah.
your story. I
I'm
want to hear your
self-taught.
story as a designer.
I'm self-taught.
Yeah.
So I get that question too, where did you go to school? And I didn't. Like, I went to high school and I did a TAFE. I did a fine art illustration because I was going to illustrate children's books. That was the goal. And so building websites was the furthest thing from my mind. And so when people ask me now, I proudly say that I am self-taught because I think it shows that you're really passionate in the subject that you are learning, and you're taking on jobs and learning on the go. And I think that's a real entrepreneurial spirit. So I don't see it as a bad thing anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I did at the start. I used to
Mm-hmm.
avoid avoid answering that one. The fear,
Yeah, me too.
the fear that someone might not want to pay me or might not respect me enough, but it's quite the opposite. With the experience that I've had, and that's all I can talk on.
Okay, yeah. So you said that, and that's exactly how I felt. I felt that if I told people that I was a self-taught designer, that they would be like, "Okay, you're definitely not worth this much money." But
Mm,
I found it to be the opposite. Like people instead of
yeah.
saying, "Okay, you're not worth anything, whatever," they were, I would say, more impressed at the fact that
Mm,
I didn't go to school for it. It was more like
yeah.
they felt that I had the intuition of a designer, and that's something that it's almost like instinctive for me. So
Hmm.
in a weird way, they
Same.
kind of trust that. They trust that, and they say,
Yes.
"What do you think about this?" And so a lot of times it's just like I go with feeling as well. Like I don't feel that this is the best way of doing this. And
Mm,
in my 15 years of experience, what you said is exactly true. Like it seems to be the opposite that's happened. Like if I admit to them that I'm a self-taught designer, and it's just the experience that taught me that this will work, or this looks good, this feels
mm,
good, or whatever. Um, People seem to
yeah.
trust that more.
I think your advertising background would help so much too. I've got a real marketing background. And so I think when you can look through design projects and see the client's objective, maybe it's a bit of that also helping us with that intuitive design. I get that a lot from clients, like that I just intuitively knew. I'm like, yeah, but also, you know what will convert. So,
Yes, actually, that's true. Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I just never managed to pinpoint, because experience taught me that if I did something in a certain way, it will not work. So I've done it so many
mm,
times that later on, when I meet with a client, and when I, whatever it is that they were asking for, if I did that, they would think that it was just, or I would think that it was just instinct. But if I really think about it, in the back of my head, it was experience. It was all about, okay,
mm,
remember you did this last time and it didn't work. So since we're both self-taught designers, let me ask you about this ugly thing called this thing where you feel like you're not worth it.
self-imposter
Imposter syndrome.
syndrome.
That's it. Imposter syndrome. Can you speak a little bit more about that as a designer? Because I know for most of my
Sure.
career, that never really went away.
No, it's still very much present now. And some days I just have to tell my thoughts to have us like just be quiet and push through the
Yeah.
fear. And a lot of the time it's just fear talking. And sometimes on the days where it is quite bad, it is because I lack some experience in that job. And so, for example, if I'm integrating, for example, a website I did recently, it needed to accept vouchers and it needed to have all these really intricate things happen, and it wasn't, not one plugin could do that job. And so I had to really do a lot of research, but also talk to developers and actually have something custom created for this job. And I hadn't, this is a step in the dark for me because I hadn't had to do that before. And there's that voice like, you are not qualified to do this. You need to tell them that you're in over your head and you don't know what you're doing. And yeah, it doesn't go away, unfortunately. You have to learn to block it out, or to even be aware that it is that fear talking and not a real logical thought.
I guess the reason why I wanted to ask
Mm.
you is because I wanted the listeners to realize that, the imposter syndrome thing, like, it's real and it doesn't really go away.
Yeah.
The problem is
Mm.
we shouldn't be giving it attention, because I tried to redefine it in my own way, what imposter syndrome really is. And I've said this
Yeah.
in the past with a friend, and I said, you know what I really think about imposter syndrome? I think imposter syndrome is basically, imagine you're leading, you're ahead of the pack, you're ahead of the group, and you're the only one who can see forward, and yet there's a fog right in front of you, and you don't know what's beyond it, but you're the leader. And so
Mm.
because you're forging on, you're moving forward, and people behind you are asking, do you know where you're going? Of course you don't know where you're going. And you feel that fear, right? Like, but that's really what it
Yeah.
is. It's just because no one can really predict what's going to happen, or what is there. All I know is, even though there's a fog right there, I know that beyond that hill is the destination. And so that's where I'm trying to take people. And so whenever I
Mm-hmm.
feel that imposter syndrome like creeping in, I just tell myself that
Mm-hmm.
I'm just at the edge of discovery. And that's the only reason I'm feeling this sort of fear. I'm discovering this new side of myself, this new talent, this new skill that I'm learning, because it's something new. That's why I'm feeling
Mm-hmm.
this. So I've kind of reframed my mind to think that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, it
That's
kind of
good.
helps. That's what I'm trying to tell people, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of helps, but it doesn't go away.
I think that's a great mantra, that this fear is actually, it's not good, but it is a teller that you are learning.
Yes. I mean, I think that's the simplest way of saying it, really. You're just learning. And that's the only reason why you're afraid. But do something long
Yeah.
enough, over and over again, then it becomes familiar, and then you're not afraid of it anymore.
Mm.
And then you're not guessing.
And so rewarding when you can push through.
I mean, if you really to define an expert is really just someone who's done something over and over again, more than anyone
Exactly.
else. And that's what an expert really is, right? So you have to kind of put yourself
Mm-hmm.
in that situation where you're always feeling that fear. You're always feeling like you're an imposter. But sooner or later, you realize that people actually look at you and they call you an expert. And then I think that's really the crazy cycle of this emotionally crazy creative life as a designer. I think
It
it's
is.
people are probably like, okay, these two designers, I don't even know what they're talking about, but it really is. I feel like this goes beyond just graphic design. I feel like a lot of the creatives out there who are listening
Definitely.
also experience this, right? It's not just graphic design. It can be photography. Actually, it can be anything. It doesn't even have to be in the
I
creative
think
field. I think
anything,
in general,
any small business.
yeah, exactly. It's
Yes.
just anything.
If you're leading a team, or taking on clients and being that expert, it's just self doubt. Anyone that doesn't have
Hmm.
any self doubt is a massive narcissist.
Yes, that is very true. That is very true. Those are the hardest people to work with. You definitely don't want to work with people
Oh,
like
yeah.
that.
Well, they wouldn't work with anyone, they just do it themselves.
That's a good point. Speaking of that, have you ever
Yeah, they could do
encountered
it.
really difficult clients? And what have you, if you have, can you give us like an example of like a ridiculous story, if you have one, and how you kind of sidestep that, or you've
Sure.
dealt with it?
I've had, at the start, a lot. because I was just taking on everyone, saying yes to every job that came my way. There was, just to give you little snapshots, there was a lawyer that told me anyone with a laptop was a graphic designer.
That's a facepalm worthy statement right there. Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm like, what are you doing with, like, what are you talking to me for? You have a laptop, go for it. So I actually didn't take her on, which was one of the earlier ones that I actually said, no, I don't think we're a good fit. um, Another one was actually a local artist who I, at the start, I had a contract at this time, but there was a time where I didn't have contracts. But this artist, I saw a fellow artist and I was designing a flyer for her um, gallery opening. And so I had designed a trifold brochure for her, and we got into like second refinement. And then I got an email saying, because I was chasing feedback, uh, to finish the design for her. And so I could then invoice her, because at that time I wasn't getting any money at the start. And
Mm-hmm.
she said, I don't need the brochure anymore. That's okay. Like, we're done. And I'm like, but I've already designed it. And so I'm like, sure, that'll cost X amount, and sent her the invoice. And she just ghosted me. And that was my first real jaw drop moment, thinking, we're in the same small town. You're another artist. It would be like me commissioning you to do a painting, and then three-quarters of the way through the painting go, I don't want it anymore. Bye.
That sounds terrible.
So from that, I just then never started a job until I had a deposit. And so it was a great lesson. It wasn't, looking back, it wasn't a lot of money, but it was a lot of money for me at that time. And more the disrespect. And I know that you're about to say you've got a similar experience, and unfortunately, it is all too common for our industry to not get paid.
Yes, it's very, very common. I can't even count the how many times people have ghosted me after I sent them the invoice. After I've given them the deliverables and sent them the invoice,
Mm,
bye. It's like, we don't know you. And I'm
mm,
like, okay, this is terrible.
yeah.
But this goes to, I mean, there's a lesson there, right? There's so many ways of
Mm,
trying to eliminate that problem, right? There are obviously the contracts,
yep.
asking for a percentage down before even, getting
Mm-hmm.
starting with the work. There's so many things, but what I want to talk about briefly right now is your ability to actually pinpoint the right clients. It seems like you have no problem saying no to people, and I'm sure experience taught you that. But how do you say no to people if you feel like you're not a good fit? Like, what's the proper way of
Sure.
saying that? Because I know a lot of designers who are not very good with communicating that through, in a very respectful way. Myself included. I'll be like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. Do
Yeah.
I just delete their email, or what? Well, like, how would you respond to something
Ghost
like that?
them. The designer's revenge.
Yeah.
I took a course, and it was a very good course. It was all about organizing your digital life, and with it came some canned emails, and one of them was a canned email to respectfully decline a job. And I thought, who would use that? Who would ever say no to work?
Right.
um, but then after a few years, you realize, you don't want to do that job. You don't want to work with that person. And you do need to say no. And you need to do it tactfully, because you might want to say yes to them later on. And you don't want to for me, I don't want to burn any bridges. I still want to call a client that I've worked with that maybe we didn't have the best working relationship. I still want to feel like morally, ethically, I'm still okay to talk to you. If I bump into you down the street, like, I would never want to have to avoid people because of something that happened at work. And so to learn how to say no, and even to stay true to your boundaries is a real skill, and you only get good at it by, again, practice and doing it again and again and feeling okay. And also, like, I feel like the more times you can say kindly no, sorry, or you don't say sorry, the more time you can say look, and then explain the situation in a way where it's just a thought that came to mind. It's not like no, full stop. Um, I did a post not long ago, and it did really well on Instagram on ways to say no. So anyone listening, you want to find me on Instagram.
Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah,
but
definitely.
the carousel, it gave them situations and ways you can answer it, and it I didn't realize how many people would gobble that up. That it's people was like thanking me so much. This is so useful. I'm going to bookmark this, and it really is those. It's relevant to any industry because everyone needs to be able to kindly, respectfully stick to your boundaries or say no to jobs. And so for me, I do have scripts, but for example, if it's a new lead, and it's something that I know I don't want to do, I typically say that I'm booked out and that here are the designers I recommend. And I really don't need to get into the nitty gritty because I don't know them and they don't know me. And so it's also for me, if I can imagine like an energy field, is I try not to let everyone in that because it's another way that I really got burnt out a few years ago because I'm really an empathetic person, and I really genuinely care about my clients. And so to care about so many people is exhausting. And so I do
It's very
only try to
exhausting, yeah.
let in um, the clients that I'm actually genuinely invested in, and it's a two-way street. So there are times where I've worked with a client, and one comes to mind, and it was not a respectful two-way street. And I was feeling like second class, and it's just not the client relationship that I wanted to have. I'm not a pixel pusher, which is industry term for you move the mouse, but the client's behind you moving your arm. Like, that's not why you hire me. Did I paint that visually?
Oh yeah, it's a very
And
familiar
so,
scene, all too familiar for me. So,
even to explain that to the client that is trying to take the lead in the decision making, to then fall back on um, your experiences and that you recommend this way. And if you want to go with this way, I'll show you what that looks like, but I also recommend this way because it will work, and give them case studies and give them a lot of the time it's a power balance. And unfortunately, a lot of the designers, in their keenness to be liked, lose a bit of their power. And then the client will feel that they need to call the shots to get the project done. So it's about maintaining that. I use the word power, but it's really just a balancing act, and
mm,
to involve your client, but not involve your client to the point where they're feeling like they need to give you the answers because you should be the problem solver. Um, or the designer should be the one giving them solutions to their objectives. And
mhm.
all my clients, I can then look back on what's happened, and mm, I have a lot to do with it. You know, I might have been too willing to do more revisions because they wanted to see what it looked like in neon yellow,
Oh
where I could
God,
have just said, look, neon yellow's.
it's not gonna look good. Oh man, yeah, that's a
I'm sure you've got so many stories. Um, and I love hearing them too because it makes it, as a solopreneur, or I work from home, and a lot of the time it is quite lonely. It's only sharing our stories on social media, and that is really like it's a two-way streak. If I'm giving people, like people that follow me, some insight and some content that they find useful, great. But I actually, it's therapeutic for me to be like, this is what happened and this is how I fixed it. And so a lot of the time it is, I'd do it even if I had like 2 followers. I would still be posting
Yes.
carousels, ways to say no.
Yes.
It's a reminder to me.
Yes. No, what you just said is hit it like it hits home for me because I've said this so many times in the past. The reason why I started the podcast 2 years ago was out of that feeling of being so isolated. I've been prior to the pandemic, I've already been working from home 3 years prior to that. And it feels very, very isolating. It's so I miss having to look, to my side and seeing my a coworker and saying, "Hey, how was your weekend?" And just like having normal,
Yeah.
human conversations. And I miss that. And so I said during the pandemic, I met someone online who was like, "Hey, we should start a podcast." I'm like, "This is my excuse to just socialize with
Yeah.
people." And so it really what you said really resonated with me because it really does feel lonely when you're a solopreneur, like you said. And also, I wanted to say that your carousel that you said that did really well. I think I find it really fascinating that as designers, there's so many intricate things about this trade
Mm.
that people don't really recognize, like especially the psychology behind it, like the communication, like how are you? It always feels like I'm tippy toeing when I'm sending emails or getting on calls with clients because
Yeah.
the interesting thing about being a designer, right? The interesting thing about being a designer is that we're mind readers or we're trying to be mind readers. We're trying to understand their vision. We're trying to understand their goal. But at
Yeah.
the same time, we're treading very lightly because we don't want to step on their vision. What we're trying to do, really, what
Mm.
we're trying to achieve is help them communicate whatever is in their head or in their hearts and make it into a physical or something that they can a tangible thing, something that they can see, that they can interact with. And I think that's really what designers are supposed to do. I mean, at least for what we do, right? Like we're that middle person between their vision and the actual manifestation of that vision. It's very refreshing to hear you express that because I really do feel like designers get stressed out because there's so much that goes on in our heads. Like, how would the clients feel about this,
Mm.
and how would they react to this? Even if I were to give my professional opinion or my professional recommendation, it's not. They're people
Yeah.
too. They have feelings. I can't be like, well, neon green sucks on any logo. You know what I mean? I can't say that. It has to be in a very in a very delicate way. So that's one
Yeah.
thing that I want people to understand. When you guys who are listening to this are talking or working with designers, there's a lot more that goes on in their heads, more than just what did Jade use? Pixel pusher, I think. And I know exactly that
Pixel pusher.
illustration
Yeah.
where the designer is basically just sitting on the computer desk and someone was holding their hand and moving the mouse. That's why I started
Yeah.
laughing because it's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I've had jobs where it was literally like that. It's like someone it was a long time ago, but someone basically took the mouse from my hand and be like, no, do this. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm just a body here that just sits in this chair. Yeah, it was
I'm
terrible.
done.
It was
Yep.
terrible.
Oh,
It's
it's
great to
terrible.
hear another designer's perspective. I know it's terrible, but it's nice to hear at the same time that these stories, although terrible, they're very real. And I'm hoping that whoever's listening to this, and if they've gone through it, if they've experienced something similar to that, know that you're not alone, and it's just part of the process. And I think
Yeah.
the experience, like what Jade was talking about earlier. I mean, I'm looking at Jade right now, like she looks so like she knows exactly what she's doing. Like she's the professional, she's the expert. That's how I see her. And I've always like found her brand to be that brand that I'm like, when I grow up, I'm gonna be like that. That's what I tell myself. And it's like it's
Oh.
one of those things that I look up to, right? So um, it's very comforting to hear that behind that, it's just the same. Not that I wish that you struggle, but it's the same struggle. It's the same, the growing pains that every designer is experiencing.
Yes.
So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for sharing that pretty much.
Oh, of course. And thank you for your kind words. I didn't know that you had followed me for so long. And so that has blown my mind. And I'm very humbled. It's very lovely to hear nice things said about yourself. So thank you.
No, no, it's really great, honestly, and I'm not just saying that because you're a guest, and because like you said when you were sharing that carousel post, part of the reason I think that it's done well is because people resonate with what your experiences. Like, on Instagram, especially on social media, we call it a highlight reel. We like to see the
Yeah.
highlights, like especially that the typical ones you see at the end of the year. Like, these are the things that I achieved
Hmm.
during the year
A year
2019
in
or
review.
2020. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, right? Like, I'm guilty of that, and it's just you celebrate the wins. But unfortunately, what I
Hmm.
wasn't thinking about is that people tend to look at you and think that that's all there is. And that's why sometimes when I talk to someone, they're like, your life must be easy. No, it's not easy.
Mm.
It's very difficult, probably just as challenging as any other people, someone else's um, career. It's just that I'm just showing you the highlights. And what I appreciate about the stuff that you share is you're sharing what's real, right? Like, and I think that's why people like that. Suddenly, designers don't feel alone.
Yeah.
Suddenly, creatives don't feel alone. Like, oh yeah, that's true. In a weird way, it's like misery loves company. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, we hate
Big
clients
time.
that are like
Yes.
this, but I'm right. Like, I'm glad that I'm not the only one who's experiencing this. So, in a weird way, misery just loves company. So, I think that's why people
And
appreciate it. And that's definitely one of the reasons I appreciate it.
I think it helps too is to break the stigma. Like I talk a lot about mental health and it's okay to not be okay. And I remember before I had when I was talking about that bad year, I had a very public panic attack and an ambulance was called and it was, very embarrassing. But before sharing that story, I had so much doubt. Do I post this? Am I going to lose work if I talk about, that I'm actually struggling right now? Um, and do I talk about this? But there was such you have to talk about like the other side of my brain or thought process was, no, I need to talk about this because one, clients might leave me alone and I won't have to tell them directly.
I love I love
Two,
that that's still in your brain, like so that they can leave me alone. It's so funny.
and two, it might actually help someone else that's going through this. And the number two part of it was so like, I didn't expect the amount of people to get in touch with me thanking me about sharing the story because there's a lot of people that deal with panic attacks on the regular basis. I thought I was having a heart attack. I thought I was dying. I'd never really had one. And so to hear that people just were having these regularly, I'm like, listen to your body. Like something is going on. Like this is not healthy. You need to make a change. And so
Yes.
me
Yes.
sharing that not so glorious, what's the opposite of a highlight? The shadow,
I know.
the
I
shadow
can't think of
reel.
the opposite of the shadow reel. I like that. Maybe that should be a thing for you. Maybe
Talking
or
about,
for us to try out. Like
yeah,
at the end of the year, here's my shadow reel. Like all the terrible things that happened
yeah,
to me in the
a
last year.
year,
Right.
a year in review. Yes, it's just doom and gloom. uh, I think it's really important to talk about these things because it really does help create a genuine connection, not only with people that follow you, other designers, but a client who wasn't a client at that time that I shared that post actually reached out to me and said, I just read your post, no time pressure, but I would love to work with you. Thank you for sharing your story. It really meant a lot to me. And I now know if I was on the fence before, I'm 100% wanting to work with you after reading that. And it just, all my self imposter syndrome thoughts just shut up because it was like proof. Like, people want to work with people that they feel like they know and they like. And so the more that you can share about yourself, I feel like, within limits, of course, the more connection the clients will feel with you and the more trusting, and, everything is just better.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. And I appreciate you sharing this because I here's a funny thing. So the last person that I had on this podcast, we were also talking about this exact topic. And I shared with her my experience that I recently just experienced this. So I've had panic attacks in the past. I've had a couple of ER visits where I thought I was having a heart attack. And
Mm,
the nurses and the doctors were like, okay, first of all, you're not having a heart attack. But I did appreciate the fact that they didn't. I mean, it would be in very
mock
bad
you.
taste, but I'm glad that they didn't laugh at me. But they were like,
Yes.
this, you're just having a really bad panic attack. And so, but recently, it was within this year that I had, I would call it a mental breakdown. And it
Mm,
was not, it was very unpleasant. And the last guest that I had, I ended up talking more than my guest. I know I talk a lot, but I ended up talking more than my guest because I kept like it started to feel like a everything was like gushing out, like all
yeah.
my feelings and all that stuff. It was all coming out. And to your point,
You
it's
needed to get it
very
out.
important to share that. Yes, you needed to get it out. I needed to get it out. So conversations like this, I appreciate it. And for a lot of people, if you're not going through it, you know, good for you. I mean, honestly, like I'm so happy that you don't
Yeah.
have to go through it. But there's a lot of people out there who feel this, but they just can't express it or are afraid to say it. And to Jade's point
Hmm.
earlier, having to share that side of her life, it feels very vulnerable. Obviously, it feels very uncomfortable. But if it means it helps other people cope with it, I think it's worth it. And I think I just wanted to say I appreciate that. I appreciate that about you and how you approach this sort of topic.
It's been a really tough few years as well, and I think we all need to treat everyone with a little bit more patience because you just don't know what someone else is going through on the other end. And
Mm-hmm.
having boundaries and having them in place and even being organized really helps my anxiety, and then I just don't get to that point anymore. Um,
Right.
but yeah, I'm sorry to hear that you've struggled recently with it. It's not fun. I understand it is not fun. It's
No,
not fun to go
not at
through and
all.
also
But
have to parent and also run a business
yes,
and remain composed when inside you're
I
dying.
I I think that was the toughest part for me, honestly. Exactly. I think that was the toughest part for me is trying to put on that strong
Brave
and
face.
brave face for my daughter because she came up to me. She's like, "Daddy, are you okay?" I'm like, "I'm fine," but I'm like crying. You know what I mean? It was terrible, and it's hard because I couldn't even really explain it to them. You know what I mean? It's something
Mm.
that I couldn't communicate it. I couldn't say I'm just upset from I would say was just I'm just upset. I'm just tired. And that's all. Daddy
It's
just needs to
emotional
rest.
trauma,
And so I gave
darling.
myself yeah, so it's you're right. I keep forgetting that you also have kids and it's just
Yes,
that added
they were in the
pressure.
car
It's
when I was having the panic
oh
attack,
my.
and um,
Mhm.
the ambulance was called because I had them in the car and we were on a busy road. And I just kept thinking, what if they get out of the car and what if I pass out? And didn't know what it was at that point because I hadn't experienced anything
Yes.
like it. I just knew I couldn't breathe and I was getting
Mhm.
pins and needles in my face. And then I was talking to my husband on the phone and I actually couldn't articulate my words and it sounded like it wasn't clear anymore. Well, I couldn't understand what I
Uh-huh.
was saying. I'm like, what is going on? Am I having a stroke? And so I just panicked.
Yes.
And And
Mhm.
again, that same experience of being so embarrassed and them saying, just breathe. That's all you need to
Yeah.
do. Oh,
I know it's
oh man.
I know that feeling so well, like that embarrassment that comes after. But
Uh-huh.
if you guys are experiencing this, if anyone who is has experienced this, do not be ashamed. We are
No.
people. This is a normal thing. It's we should accept this as something that happens. You know what I mean? Like this is
It's a
nothing.
warning.
It's
It's
not
a
funny. It's
warning that something
yeah.
needs to
It's a warning.
change.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Jade and I are laughing about it because we're just laughing about ourselves, but it's
Yeah.
not a laughing matter. Like if you are going through this, definitely talk to someone. Talk to someone,
Yes.
and don't be afraid to or to try to just explain it. Like it does feel like a heart attack. Like my experience was
Yeah.
like I felt like the prickly sensation in my fingers, and then
Mm-hmm.
it was more like I couldn't process anything. I remember I was driving down this road and I had the windows up and it felt incredibly quiet. It was too quiet for me. I was freaking out. I rolled down the windows and then every sound that I heard outside was also freaking me out. So it's like I didn't know what to do. And I remember I called my
Yeah.
wife. This was like back in I would say like this was like 10 years ago. And I
Okay.
called my wife and she didn't understand. She didn't understand what was going on. And it just so happened that she was in the shower. And she's like, I'm sorry, I have to call you back. I'm in the shower. And so she hung up. And I'm like,
Like, I
already
need to
freaking out.
talk
So
to you.
I know. And then I called, this is the embarrassing thing for me. I called a coworker that I did not know this person at all. The only reason I called this person because she was a new employee at this time and she needed to give she had like a work phone and we all had to have each other's numbers. And her number
Yeah.
was the first one that I saw and I called her. It was 10 o'clock at night. I was driving home from work and she was
What
very
an
understanding,
initiation.
empathetic. Oh my god, it was so scary though. It was so and I remember I remember we're still friends to this day, and that's why I
I
appreciate
bet
this
you're
person
bonded
dearly.
for life.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
So I told her, I said, Vanessa, I apologize, but I am freaking out and I don't know what to do. And the first thing she did
Yeah.
was she said, okay, Michael, calm down. First of all, if you're driving, stop by on the side of the road if you can, and just know that everything is okay. You just have to let this pass. And
Mm,
that's all I needed. Honestly, someone to
that's
kind
so
of
nice.
just reel me in and just reassure me that everything is still okay. It's just your head. Your head needs to quiet down a little bit. And so that was
Yeah.
my first panic attack. That was like, yeah, I would say like 10 years ago, I think. And it's embarrassing, but look, now I have a friend. And so, I mean, there's the upside to that, right? Like I've learned my lesson and I also have a friend. But yeah, I mean, going back to this point, I mean, it's a real thing. And I didn't know this, we
Mm,
were going to go down this topic, but I think it's important enough for us to address it. Jade, I feel like I could go on and on and on. I honestly could talk to you more about the design process and just like being a solopreneur and a designer in general. However, I do respect your time, and I know you have children. I know you have a life. So, I think I'm just going to wrap this up. And I just want to say again,
okay.
thank you so much for finding the time to be on this podcast. I really do appreciate it. You've given such great insight, and I hope I didn't talk too much this episode. I tend to
Oh,
talk a lot,
stop it.
and
No.
I
I
feel like
love the casual format. It's been beautiful because I don't like having to prepare. I much prefer it to be like an organic conversation. And I think that's what it was. And it's so nice to actually get to know you more than just,
oh, thank
oh,
you.
you're
I
back.
I appreciate that. I'm back. My camera's back on. So my camera was overheating.
Yay.
That's why, because it's a little warm today. But no, thank you. I appreciate that.
It's nice to get to know you rather than just your beautiful workspace as well. So,
Oh, thank you. I know. I'm more than I'm more than just this. So that's why I tell my
yeah,
like
I'm
my
more than the
the people
decor.
like I'm more than just the yeah, exactly. I'm this yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Jade. Jade, if anyone wants to find you on Instagram, how would they find you? Or even get in touch with you, how would they do that?
Sure. So I'm the most active on Instagram, and my account is the Brainchild Studio. And you can find my website at thebrainchild.com.au because I am Australian. So .com.au is at the end of the brainchild.
There you go. The beautiful land of beaches and spiders. That's how I always think of Australia.
And slugs and snakes and koalas.
Everything else.
And fires.
Jade,
what else?
if you are at all interested, I would love to have you back as a guest in a future episode. The doors are always open for you, and I think it was just such a great conversation, and I would love to continue this later down the road if you are up to it, if you are
yes,
open.
of course.
Right. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I would love that.
Well,
thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And also, thank you for being early. I know, Jay, you guys, you have to know this. We planned this later on, but Jade was very aware of the fact that, I also have children. And she said, we can start now. We can start early. She's great. And you guys should follow her. Check her Instagram. Check her Instagram account. Well, Jade, it's been a pleasure. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day. I hope the flooding doesn't get worse. I wish you all the best.
Stop the rain, please.
You take care of yourself, and I'll see you again soon.
Okay, bye.